Hi, Alan Stratton from As Wood Turns. As a wood turner, I'm always on the lookout for good wood to turn. In fact, people that know me offer me a lot of firewood. And in fact, this is a piece of firewood that my brother salvaged. However, generally speaking, firewood that's good and dry and ready to burn is not much good at all. It's generally very checked and split and cracked already and oftentimes is not salvageable. This, however, was very freshly cut, very green. He had stored it in a bag, and so when he gave it to me, I was able to salvage it. In this case, I wanted to turn a little vase, but I also don't like to hollow through small little holes. So in this vase, I rough turned it green, hollowed it out somewhat, left it to dry about 9 months until it stabilized in the weight, and then turned it, fitted it together again, and tried to disguise the joint as best I could. And there's always some offset. And here we have a vase hollowed from green wood. I've mounted this chunk of wet black locust wood between centers. It is easy to rough it with my bowl gouge. However, black locust stinks like a barnyard. I'm cutting tenons on both ends since I will eventually be cutting it in half and mounting both ends. My skew does a great job of refining the dovetail tenon. Now I can mount it to my chuck with one of the tenons, and I can start making a rough shape of a tall vase with a ball-type bottom. I'm using my large bowl gouge. Last, I can part it near the top of the widest part, making sure to remove the tailstock to prevent the wood from binding when it separates. Since the base is still mounted to the chuck, I'm using a forstner bit to rough hollow the base. I don't know how much black locust storts when drying, so I'm leaving the walls quite thick. Maybe a little more time to dry, therefore. I'm painting on a coat of bowl saver, which should retard drying. It has the consistency of glue, but with a bluish tint. Now for the vase neck. I'm drilling this with a 1/2 inch Forstner bit, but my bit is not long enough to go clear through, so I have to switch to a twist bit to finish. Even a small hole should speed the drying process and relieve some of the drying stress. And coat the neck portion with the bowl saver stuff. After a couple of months, I weighed each piece and wrote the date and the weight so that I can tell when it's dry. The weight has stabilized. It's actually a bit heavier than the last weight. It's as dry as it's going to be. I've mounted the base portion at the original drive center marks. A cove center is a perfect fit to the opening. I need to retrim the tenon. It has distorted, but not by much. I also need to remove the bowl saver residue. Using a box scraper, I can enlarge the hollow center. A round nose scraper finishes the job. However, I'm realizing that I don't have a lot of room for a tenon to reattach the top to the bottom. So, easy does it as I create a very shallow mortise. Now I'm mounting the neck to the chuck. I want to do a little hollowing near the middle. My spindle gouge works great. I also need to cut a short tenon on this portion and fit it to the base. Back to the bottom portion to clean off the wood. Mark an alignment mark for the grain and glue it together. I also want to measure the inside cavity now, before gluing it, to know how much I have to work with later. After the glue dried thoroughly, I've remounted the vase in a chuck, but the vase is hanging out pretty far from the chuck. I've mounted my steady rest to stabilize it. However, the neck is just barely too small for this two-wheel design, since the opposing wheels meet above and below the wood. Rather than move the steady rest lower on the vase, I've chosen to remove one side and only use the back wheels to stabilize the vase. Now I can work on the rim. After some reduction and some hollowing, I'll sand the inside now. Now I can start working the outside of the neck with a spindle gouge. A cone center supports the neck. I'm being careful of the 1/2 inch opening through the neck. For the base, the inside is 2 1/4 inches, the outside is 3 inches. 3/4 divided in half is 3/8. I can go a bit thinner. Since I hate wood funnels, I'm checking a couple of times. Now I can sand up through the grits. With sanding completed, there's a couple more details to handle. First is to disguise the joint between the top and the bottom. With some wood lost, there's always some offset. I'm cutting one shallow groove on top of the joint, then another about 1/8 of an inch away. I'm also cutting another pair of grooves near the bottom for a touch of symmetry. Then touch it with a bit of fine sandpaper. Finally, to address the very bottom, I need to part it off. As I do, I'm cutting just a little relief to lift the vase off the surface it sits on. My skew reduced the mounting tenon. My parting tool finishes the job. A bit of sanding removes the final nub and smooths off the base. Finally, I'm giving the vase a bath inside and out with walnut oil, then wiping off all the excess oil. I like the oil finish. It's a bit more of a matte finish. If I change my mind later, I can buff it to a shine. A problem with this vase is the lack of instant gratification. It required about 9 months to be assured it was dry and ready to finish. Another problem is that I have to live with the choices I made 9 months ago. Does that sound familiar? Still, it is a nice vase with a good weight to the bottom to stabilize it with anything that may be put in it. Please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe on my website, tell your friends, and send me your comments and questions. Every week I make a new wood turning video. Please wear your full face shield anytime the lathe is running. So until next week's video, this is Alan Stratton from As Wood Turns.